At 6:15 p.m. on September 16th, 1928, a major Category 4 hurricane came ashore just 30 miles east of here in Palm Beach. It ripped homes from its foundations. Rooftops came flying off, destroyed and leveled the entire region, left it uninhabitable for some time. But what happened along the coast pales in comparison to what happened in this city that I'm currently in, 30 miles west of Palm Beach. Talking about a city called Belle Glade. The hurricane was so significant that a statue was erected in memory of the thousands of people that passed away. And you can see there the depiction of harsh waves, storm surge taking away homes, and a family fleeing from the deadly waves, the deadly winds, and the utter destruction that took place in this city in 1928. In today's video, we're going to visit a couple of mass graves where thousands of victims were buried. We're going to learn about why that hurricane was so destructive here, which is farther inland than the coastal. You would think right along the coast is where the extensive damage would be, storm surge and all that. But no, 30 miles west of the coastline is where most of the deaths occurred. And this is just one town of many that sustained extensive damage, extensive deaths. And by the way, the 1928 Okeechobee hurricane is among the deadliest hurricanes to ever strike the United States of America. And it serves as a reminder of why we must prepare every hurricane season. I'm currently in Belle Glade, a city of just 16,000 people. Interestingly, when the 1928 hurricane struck in September, Belle Glade had officially been a town for just 4 months. It was incorporated on April 9th, 1928. Just a few days prior to the hurricane making landfall, many people in cities just like this were going about their day, with only just a small attention being paid to a storm brewing in the Caribbean. The devastation that lied ahead was something absolutely nobody expected. If you ever find yourself wanting to go to the Lake Okeechobee region, just know there's nothing but open land, farms, agriculture, vegetation, crops, for miles. So you're gonna have the lake, of course. Belle Glade is probably the most populated city, if I'm not mistaken. But now we are going to Pahokee, which is a town closer to Lake Okeechobee, meaning they caught the brunt of the storm surge. And it would not be the full experience without the bad luck. Oh, it's just, okay. Never mind, I'm not complaining. I was gonna say it would not be the full experience without a massive, long freight train interrupting my commute in the middle of nowhere. But fortunately, that was all. As you guys can probably see, the street level is just behind me and we're on an incline. We are driving up the Herbert Hoover Dike. We can't see the lake just yet. We're going straight up, and at some point when we get to the top, by the way, look at that. When we get to the top, we should be able to see the lake. Wow. Check that out. I am standing at the top of the Herbert Hoover Dike. At its highest point, it is 35 feet above Lake Okeechobee, which is just right behind me. So imagine, 1928, this did not exist. This was much shorter. I believe at its highest point, 5 feet or something ridiculous like that. And the material was not as it is today. So obviously any major hurricane coming through would just push all of the lake over that 5-foot tall levee and into surrounding communities, but not anymore, because you guys can see there is a hill which we have to drive up to get into, and then we're at the very top, and then another hill going down towards the lake region. Just a few days prior to the hurricane making landfall in South Florida, many people were unaware of the threat, the danger that lied ahead in the next couple of days. I'm talking about as late as Friday, September 14th, just 2 days from the hurricane striking. People were unaware. And that's because forecasters kept saying it wasn't gonna come. There's a persistent forecaster named Richard Gray who kept on saying that there was no chance of it coming here. And officials in Cuba, just south of here, agreed. The belief was that the hurricane would come out of the Caribbean, specifically Puerto Rico, where they got believe a Category 5 strength hurricane, and recurve and go away from Florida. Unfortunately, that's not what happened. And to make matters worse, newspapers from all across South Florida, including Palm Beach Post, picked up on those sentiments. Nothing was coming this way. There was to be no danger to surrounding areas such as the one I am currently in right now, riding through. This is the Pahokee region of Lake Okeechobee. So it wouldn't be until September 16th, 1928 at 10:30 in the morning that Richard Gray finally sounded the alarm, issued hurricane warnings, but not just for Palm Beach or 50 miles, 70 miles. No, it was over 200 miles between Miami and Daytona, Florida. Nobody knew exactly where it was going to go. By then, the morning newspaper had already been out. It was useless. People still woke up in the morning on Sunday thinking this wasn't coming here. But unfortunately, by the time the afternoon edition would come out, it was too late. By the way, 1 in 40 people had radios back then in South Florida. Nobody had TVs, especially in this area. Telephones were a luxury, so I wouldn't expect anyone here to have phones. And they did not have the tools that we have today, where I can just go on my smartphone and look at satellite imagery of where this hurricane's at, look at the National Hurricane Center, and see what they're telling me. They didn't have that. At 6:15 p.m. Sunday, September 16th, the hurricane known as the Okeechobee Hurricane of 1928 made landfall in the Palm Beach region. It's just 30 miles, just 30 small miles in that direction. It destroyed things. It killed people. It left areas leveled. Well, this lake right here, as this hurricane is known by, Lake Okeechobee, it washed away communities, drowned people, destroyed homes to a level that had not been seen before, and to this day is among the deadliest of all hurricanes to impact the United States. There's estimates of 2,500 people, although there could be more because some people were just never found. 2,500 people passed away, most of which were black migrants who were just working in this area, and they didn't have a means to get out. They didn't have advance notice. I mean, nobody did in this region. As the hurricane started making its way to Lake Okeechobee, it crossed diagonally across the state. So it went right for the lake. This water right here was being pushed. Hurricanes spin counterclockwise in this part of the world, in the northern hemisphere. So as it was approaching, the winds were piling the water towards the south of the lake. So communities like Belle Glade, like I showed you guys, Pahokee, Canal Point, they were being pushed by those intense hurricane force winds to the south. And then as the hurricane kind of lifted up, the winds changed direction. They started pushing north. So communities like Okeechobee, to the north of Lake Okeechobee, were impacted by storm surge, and the Herbert Hoover Dike, which was built after 1932, is this right here. They didn't have this elevation that we see here. Now, fortunately, the communities on the other side of that big hill, now they have a levee. So this, if anything, God forbid, happens with a major hurricane, the lake would continue to push. I'm sure it would make it far enough, but that should stop the waves from going over and impacting the communities, washing away homes, and drowning everybody. So it was a lesson learned. The dike was too short. I want to read from you what a woman wrote in her 1929 memoir, a survivor of this hurricane, her experience as the hurricane battered surrounding communities. This is from Ruth Carpenter. Quote, "It was as if all the devils in hell were shouting in our ears. The house shook like a leaf. A gable was taken off the upstairs room, and all at once, we noticed water coming up in the floor just an inch or two at a time." And that would be just within miles of where we are sitting right now. Utter destruction in 1928. The levee was only about 5 feet tall at the time, made of materials that are not obviously useful. Today, that dike is approximately 35 feet tall, and it's made out of gravel, rock, limestone, sand, and shells. It also surrounds 148 miles of Lake Okeechobee. It was erected by the Army Corps of Engineers. They consistently maintain it. They have hurricane floodgates in certain sections of the lake. And it was a project that cost over $1 billion that is still ongoing today with improvements. How can something that appears to be so calm be so destructive and deadly? Just take a listen to these calm waves. We are now in Port Mayaca, which is just about 20 to 30 minutes north of where we were in Canal Point. We see the historical marker here. Hurricane of 1928 mass burial site. It mentions that approximately 1,600 victims were buried in a mass grave here in Port Mayaca in Martin County. Another 743 victims were buried in mass graves in West Palm Beach, which we're going to check out after this one. All right, let's drive slowly and see if we find anything else related to the 1928 hurricane. Here are the hours, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Port Mayaca Memorial Gardens and Park. Okay, I found the marker here. If you ever want to visit, just inside, make a left. Actually, you might have to do the full loop and then make a left, kind of like going towards the exit again. So it says, in memoriam to the 1,600 pioneers in this mass burial who gave their lives in the 1928 hurricane so that the Glades might be as we know it today. Very interesting. So 1,600 people are buried here in the Port Mayaca Cemetery. And that's not the only mass grave, as you guys read on the sign. Let's go check out the other one, which is in West Palm Beach. Before we go over to the mass grave site in West Palm Beach, I want to mention that the majority of people buried in not just this site, the 1,600 here, but the ones over in West Palm Beach that you're going to see in a bit, were black migrants. White people were given coffins, given proper burials. I believe they're at the Woodlawn Cemetery, also in West Palm Beach. But I don't think that every white person did get a coffin. I think some people ended up in mass graves as well, because the roads at the time were impassable. And if they couldn't reach one of the victims to give them a proper burial, a proper coffin, then I think they were dumped in one of these burial sites. But the majority were black migrants. And the black migrants weren't just put in mass graves. Some of them were piled and set on fire as a means to dispose of the body. We're now at the historic cemetery and mass grave site in West Palm Beach. Located at 25th Street and Tamarind Avenue, this park has the other mass burial site where over 600 black migrant farm workers were buried. There's a couple of markers with information about the 1928 hurricane, and towards the northeast of the park is a fenced area where the bodies were stacked. The plaque just outside the small fence reads, "In remembrance of the 674 African American victims who perished during the devastating hurricane of September 16, 1928. These victims were buried here in a mass grave." The plaque was dedicated on the 80th anniversary in 2008. Alright, that's going to do it for this video. I know it is a very tough topic to talk about, but it is very necessary as a reminder of how far we've come in technology and weather reporting, forecasting. And while we're not 100% there yet, countless lives, because of the people, the experts working at the National Hurricane Center, the National Weather Service, local meteorologists conveying their messages, we don't see the death toll as it was in 1928. Over 2,500 dead, people missing. Now, on top of better building codes to withstand major hurricanes, we have evacuation routes, we have paved roads like the one I'm driving on right now. We have ample time to get the message out to people that they need to evacuate, and great road conditions to do so. So with that said, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. It helps support this channel and get the video out to more people. Subscribe and hit that bell button because it will notify you when I upload a new video. And as always, description will have sources as to where I got all this information, and so you can go read up more about it. With that said, I have a 2-hour drive back home, so I will catch you guys in the next video.